In the early 1900s, a child was born in Budapest who would one day change how the world thinks. His name was John von Neumann. But here is the surprising part. By the age of 6, he could divide huge numbers in his head. By 8, he was reading advanced mathematics like it was a simple storybook. And by his early 20s, he had already become one of the smartest minds in Europe. But his real question was not just about numbers. He wanted to understand something deeper. How do people make decisions when others are also making decisions? Think about daily life. A shopkeeper sets prices while watching competitors. A driver chooses a route based on traffic. A country decides whether to fight or negotiate. In all these cases, choices are connected. Before this, most people believed decisions were based on emotional or luck. There was no clear system to study them. That is where Neumann changed everything. In 1928, he published a powerful idea. He showed that strategic situations could be studied using mathematics. He introduced the idea of players, choices, and outcomes. Most importantly, he proved something shocking. In many competitive situations, there exists a best strategy that no player should change. This became known as the minimax principle. This idea meant that even in conflict, there could be balance. Even when two sides compete, their actions can settle into a stable pattern. At first, very few people understood how important this was. It seemed like abstract math far from real life. But slowly, its power began to appear. Economists started using it to study markets. Military planners saw its value in strategy. Politicians realized it could explain global tensions. Over time, research showed that structured decision making could improve results. In business, companies using strategy often performed better than those relying only on instinct. What started as one man's curiosity became a powerful tool used across the world. From pricing to negotiation, from diplomacy to competition, the idea spread everywhere. And yet, this was only the beginning. The true impact of game theory would appear when the world faced its biggest conflicts. Because when nations began to compete with powerful weapons, the stakes became life and death. Decisions were no longer small, they could shape the future of humanity. And in that moment, the ideas of John moved from theory into reality, changing history forever. What seemed like simple logic soon guided leaders, generals, and entire governments. It influenced nuclear strategies, economic policies, and global alliances. Every move depended on predicting the next move of others. This created a new way of thinking. People no longer asked only what they should do, they asked what others would do next. And that question changed everything. It turned decisions into strategy, and strategy into power. The world was entering a new era of thinking, where survival depended on understanding others before they acted. And the biggest question remained, who truly wins this game of strategy? Part 2, the birth of game theory. At first, game theory was just an idea. powerful but not fully understood. That changed in 1944. John von Neumann joined hands with economist Oscar Morgenstern to publish a groundbreaking book called Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. John von Neumann joined hands with economist Oscar Morgenstern to publish a groundbreaking book called Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. This was not just another academic book, it introduced a completely new way to understand decisions. The core idea was simple: people do not make decisions alone. Every choice depends on what others might do. Imagine two companies selling the same product. If one lowers prices, the other must respond. If one advertises more, the other cannot stay silent. Each move creates a reaction. This is what game theory studies. It looks at players, their choices, and the possible outcomes. The book explained that people are not just random decision makers. They are strategic. They think ahead. They try to predict others. This idea changed economics forever. Before this, traditional economics assumed that people act independently, but Newman and Morgenstern showed that real life is more complex. Every decision is connected. They introduced the concept of payoffs. A payoff is the result of a decision. It could be profit, loss, success, or failure. They also showed that players try to maximize their payoff while minimizing risk. Research later showed that businesses using strategic models could increase profits significantly. In some industries, companies using game theory improved pricing efficiency by up to 20%. But the most interesting part was this: sometimes the best decision is not obvious. For example, if two competitors both try to win aggressively, they may both lose. But if they balance their strategies, both can survive. This idea explained real world situations like price wars, negotiations, and even advertising battles. Game theory also introduced different types of games. Some were cooperative, where players work together. Others were competitive, where players try to defeat each other. And some were mixed, where cooperation and competition happen at the same time. This helped explain why companies sometimes collaborate and sometimes compete. Governments also started paying attention. They realized this theory could explain diplomacy, trade agreements, and conflicts. By the late 1940s and early 50s, game theory was no longer just mathematics, it had become a powerful tool. Universities began teaching it, economists started applying it, and decision makers slowly began to understand its value. But there was still a problem. The theory worked well for simple situations, especially two players. But real life is more complicated. There are many players, many choices, and many possible outcomes. The world needed a way to handle these complex situations, and soon a new mind would take these ideas further. Someone who would expand game theory beyond what Newman imagined. Because the game was about to become much bigger, and the next breakthrough would change not just economics, but the way humans understand cooperation, competition, and survival itself. The question was no longer just how to play the game, it was how to win when everyone else is also trying to win. Part 3: The Prisoner's Dilemma. Now imagine this situation. Two criminals are arrested. They are placed in separate rooms. They cannot talk to each other. Each one is given the same choice: stay silent or betray the other. If both stay silent, they get a light punishment. If one betrays and the other stays silent, the betrayer goes free while the other gets a heavy sentence. But if both betray each other, they both get punished. This simple situation is called the prisoner's dilemma. It became one of the most famous examples in game theory. At first, the answers seem easy. Both should stay silent, that way, both get a better outcome. But here is the problem. Each person is thinking, what if the other betray me? If one stays silent and the other betrays, the silent one suffers the most. So both prisoners start thinking strategically. To protect themselves, both choose to betray. And in the end, both get a worse outcome. This is the strange truth. Even when cooperations gives the best result, people often choose selfish actions that harm everyone. This idea shocked economists and scientists. It showed that rational decisions do not always lead to the best collective outcome. In real life, this happens all the time. Companies enter price wars. Instead of maintaining profits, they keep lowering prices to beat competitors. In the end, both lose money. Countries build more weapons to stay safe, but this creates fear on both sides, leading to tension and risk. Even in daily life, people sometimes choose short term benefit over long term trust. Studies in behavioral economics have shown that in repeated versions of this dilemma, cooperation increases over time. When people interact again and again, they learn that trust can lead to better outcomes. In fact, experiments have shown that strategies based on cooperation, like tit for tat, can perform better than purely selfish strategies in long term scenarios. This means the future matters. If people expect to meet again, they are more likely to cooperate. But if the interaction happens only once, selfish behavior becomes more common. The prisoner's dilemma also helped explain why trust is so important in society. Without trust, systems break down, businesses fail, relationships weaken, nations become unstable. But with trust, cooperation becomes possible and outcomes improve for everyone. This simple model became one of the most studied ideas in game theory. It was used in psychology, economics, politics, and even biology. Scientists used it to study how animals cooperate. Economists used it to understand markets. Governments used to analyze conflicts. And the lesson was clear. The biggest challenge is not just making the right decision, it is understanding how others will decide. Because in a connected world, your outcome depends not only on you, but also on the choice of others. And sometimes the hardest decision is not choosing what benefits you most. It is choosing to trust when you are not sure if the other side will do the same. This is the true dilemma, and it would soon play out on the biggest stage in human history. Because the world was entering a time where trust was low, fear was high, and the consequences of decisions were more dangerous than ever before. A time known as the Cold War. Part 4. Cold War Mind Games. After the Second World War, the world changed completely. Two superpowers emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. Both were powerful, both had advanced technology, and both were building nuclear weapons. By the early 1950s, each side had enough weapons to destroy millions of lives. By the 1960s, that number had grown into the tens of millions. This created a terrifying situation. If one side attacked, the other would respond, and that response could destroy both sides completely. This is where game theory became real. Leaders and military planners began using ideas from game theory to understand what to do. The most important concept was simple but frightening. It was called mutually assured destruction, often shortened to MAD. The idea was this: if both sides have enough nuclear weapons, then no one will attack, because attacking means destroying yourself as well. This created a strange balance. Both sides kept building more weapons, not to use them, but to prevent the other side from use others. At one point, global nuclear stockpiles reached over 70,000 warheads. That is enough to destroy human civilization many times over. And yet, no direct war happened because these two superpowers. But why? Because both sides were playing a strategic game. Every decision was carefully calculated. Even move was based on predicting the reaction of the other side. This was game theory in action. One of the most dangerous moments came during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. The United States discovered them. For 13 days, the world stood on the edge of nuclear war. Leaders had to decide: attack or negotiate. If they attacked, it could trigger global destruction. If they did nothing, they would appear weak. Using strategic thinking, both sides slowly stepped back. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles. The United States agreed not to invade Cuba. The crisis ended. This was one of the clearest examples of game theory saving the world. Studies later showed that decision models based on strategic thinking helped reduce the risk of escalation during such conflicts. Game theory also influenced arm control agreements. Both sides realized that reducing weapons could still maintain balance. So, they signed treaties to limit nuclear testing and weapons growth. But the fear never fully disappeared. The Cold War lasted for decades. Behind every decision was one question: what will the other side do next? This constant thinking shaped military strategies, political policies, and global alliances. Game theory turned war into a calculation. It showed that sometimes the best move is not to attack, but to create a situation where no one wants to attack. It was a game where winning did not mean defeating the enemy. It meant avoiding destruction. And in this dangerous balance, the world survived. But game theory was not only about war. Its influence was about to move into another powerful arena: the world of business, where competition is constant and strategy decides who rises and who falls. Part 5: Business Becomes a Game. After proving its power in global politics, game theory entered a new battlefield, the world of business. Companies were no longer just selling products, they were competing in complex environments where every move mattered. And slowly, many began using ideas from game theory to gain an advantage. Think about two competing brands. If one lowers prices, the other must react. If one launches a big advertisement, the other cannot stay quiet. Every decision creates pressure on the competitor. This is exactly what game theory explains. By the 1970s and 80s, large corporations started using strategic models to predict competitor behavior. One of the most common situations was the price war. Imagine two airlines selling tickets on the same route. If one airline drops prices, more customers come to them. But then the other airline also lowers prices. Soon both are earning less profit. Studies have shown that aggressive price competition can reduce industry profits by up to 30%. Game theory helped companies understand when to compete and when to avoid unnecessary battles. Another important area was advertising. Companies had to decide how much to spend. If one company spends heavily, others feel forced to match it. But if all companies spend too much, profits shrink for everyone. Using strategic thinking, businesses learn to balance their actions. Game theory also helped in negotiation. For example, when two companies are making a deal, each side tries to get the best outcome. But pushing too hard can break the deal completely. Research shows that structured negotiation strategies can increase successful deal outcomes by more than 20%. Big tech companies, banks, and even retail brands began using these models. It helped them deciding pricing, product launches, partnerships, and market entry. Another powerful concept was first mover advantage. If a company acts early, it can capture the market before competitors react. But this also comes with risk. If the strategy fails, competitors can learn from the mistake and do better. Game theory helped companies decide when to move first and when to wait. Even auctions became more strategic. Governments used auction models based on game theory to sell things like telecom licenses and natural resources. In some cases, these auctions generated billions of dollars. For example, spectrum auctions in different countries have raised over $100 billion combined. This shows how powerful strategic thinking can be. But game theory also revealed something important. Winning is not always about defeating competitors. Sometimes it is about finding balance. Companies began forming partnerships, alliances, and joint ventures. Instead of constant competition, they learned when cooperation could create more value. This mix of competition and cooperation became a key part of modern business. Today, almost every major industry uses some form of strategic analysis. From online platform deciding prices to streaming services planning content to global brands entering new markets. Behind the scenes, game theory is always present. It shapes decisions that affect billions of dollars and millions of jobs. What started as a mathematical idea had now become a business tool used worldwide. But there was still a limitation. Most early models worked best for simple situations. The real world had many players, many strategies, and many outcomes. The theory needed to grow, and soon a new thinker would take it to the next level, changing how we understand competition, cooperation, and equilibrium forever. Part 6. The Nash Breakthrough. Game theory was powerful, but it had a problem. Most early ideas worked best for simple situations, especially when there were only two players. But real life is rarely that simple. Markets have many companies. Politics has many countries. Society has millions of people making decisions at the same time. The world needed a better way to understand these complex interactions. That is when a new mind entered the story. His name was John Nash. In the early 1950s, Nash introduced a concept that would transform game theory forever. It was called the Nash equilibrium. The idea was simple but powerful. A Nash equilibrium is a situation where no player can improve their outcome by changing their strategy alone, while others keep their strategy the same. In simple words, everyone is doing the best they can, given what others are doing, and no one has an incentive to change. This solved a major problem. Now, game theory could be used for situations with many players, not just two. It became much closer to real life. Let's understand it with an example. Imagine several companies competing in a market. Each company sets its price based on what others are doing. If one company changes its price, it might lose customers or profits. At equilibrium, all companies settle into a position where changing strategy alone would make things worse. This is stability. And stability is very important because in real life, systems often move toward stable outcomes. Nash's work showed that even in competition, systems can reach a kind of balance. This idea had a huge impact. Economists began using Nash equilibrium to study markets, auctions, and negotiations. Political scientists used it to understand voting systems and international relations. Even biologists used it to study how animals behave and evolve. Research has shown that Nash equilibrium can explain patterns in pricing, cooperation, and competition across many industries. In fact, many modern economic models are built around this concept. In 1994, John Nash was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for this contribution. His work had changed how the world understands strategy, but his story was not just about success. Nash faced serious mental health challenges during his life. Despite this, his ideas continued to grow in importance. His journey later became widely known through the film A Beautiful Mind. But beyond the story, his work remains one of the most important breakthroughs in modern science. It gave game theory the power to handle real world complexity. It showed that even in chaotic systems, patterns can exist. And it helped explain why people, companies, and countries behave the way they do. Today, Nash equilibrium is used in everything from business strategy to artificial intelligence. It helps design algorithms, predict behavior, and optimize decisions. But even with this powerful tool, one question remained. Do people always act rationally? Do they always follow perfect strategies? Or is human behavior more complicated than that? Because in the real world, emotions, habits, and social factors also play a role, and that would lead game theory into its next stage, from big system to everyday life, where every small decision becomes part of a much larger game. Part 7, Game Theory in Everyday Life. Game theory may sound complex, but here is the surprising truth. You use it every single day without even realizing it. Think about traffic. When you choose a route, you are not just thinking about distance, you are thinking about what other drivers might do. If everyone chooses the same fast road, it becomes slow. So your decision depends on others. This is game theory in action. Studies in urban planning show that traffic patterns can improve by up to 20% when drivers are guided using strategic models instead of acting randomly. Now, think about social media. When you post something online, you are also thinking about how others will react. Will they like it, share it, ignore it? Platforms even use algorithms based on strategic behavior to decide what content to show. Every like, share, and comment becomes part of a larger system of interaction. Game theory also appears in relationships. Imagine two friends deciding whether to support each other or act selfishly. If both cooperate, the friendship grows. If one takes advantage, trust breaks. This is similar to the prisoner's dilemma. Research shows that long term relationships are stronger when both sides follow cooperative strategies rather than short term gains. Even in job interviews, game theory plays a role. A candidate decides how much salary to ask for. The employer decides how much to offer. Both are trying to predict each other. Ask for too much and you might lose the job. Ask for too little and you lose value. Strategic thinking helps find a balance. Game theory is also used in online marketplaces. For example, ride sharing apps adjust prices based on demand. Drivers decide when to work, customers decide when to book. All these decisions interact with each other. Behind the scenes, algorithms use strategic models to keep the system balanced. In fact, many modern technologies depend on game theory. Artificial intelligence systems use it to make decisions. Cybersecurity systems use it to predict attacks. Even online ads are placed using auction models based on strategic behavior. Global data suggests that companies using advanced decision models can improve efficiency by 15 to 25%. But here is something important. Real people are not always perfectly rational. Sometimes we act emotionally, sometimes we take risks, sometimes we follow habits instead of logic. This led to a new field called behavioral game theory. It studies how real humans actually behave, not just how they should behave. Experiments have shown that people often choose fairness over profit. They may reject an unfair offer even if it means losing money. This shows that human decisions are not only about strategy but also about values. So, game theory is not just about numbers, it is about understanding human behavior. It explains why we cooperate, why we compete, and why we sometimes make unexpected choices. From traffic to technology, from friendships to finance, it is everywhere. Every small decision you make is part of a larger system, and every system is shaped by the decisions of others. You are not just living your life, you are playing a game. A game where every move matters. Every choice has consequences, and every outcome depends on more than just you. And as the world becomes more connected, this game is becoming more complex than ever before, which leads to the biggest question of all: who is really in control of the game? Part 8: Power, Ethics, and the Future. Game theory started as a simple idea, a way to understand decisions, but today it has become something much bigger. It now shapes the world we live in, from global politics to business strategies, from artificial intelligence to online platforms. Game theory is everywhere. And with this power comes an important question: is it always used in the right way? Let's start with technology. Modern artificial intelligence systems use strategic models to make decisions. They predict human behavior, optimize outcomes, and even compete with other systems. For example, AI is used in financial markets to make trading decisions in milliseconds. These systems analyze patterns, predict reactions, and act faster than any human. In some markets, algorithmic trading now makes up more than 60% of total trades. This shows how deeply strategy has entered our systems. But there is a risk. If machines are only focused on winning, they may ignore fairness or ethics. This creates concern about control. Who decides the rules of the game? Game theory is also used in politics. Leaders use strategic thinking to plan policies, form alliances, and respond to threats. But sometimes this leads to decisions that focus only on advantage, not on people. For example, in global negotiations, countries may delay cooperation to gain better deals, even if faster action would benefit everyone. This can slow progress on important issues like climate change or economic stability. Research shows that lack of cooperation between countries can reduce global progress by large margins. This is another version of the prisoner's dilemma playing out on a global scale. In businesses, companies use strategy to maximize profit. But sometimes this leads to aggressive competition, data manipulation, or unfair practices. Large tech platforms, for example, design systems to keep users engaged as long as possible. They study behavior, predict reactions, and adjust content. This increases profit, but also raises questions about mental health, privacy, and control. So the real issue is not the theory itself. Game theory is just a tool. The real question is how we use it. Do we use it only to win, or do we use it to create better outcomes for everyone? Experts suggest that combining strategy with ethics can lead to more sustainable systems. For example, cooperative strategies in business can increase long term growth. Fair policies in politics can improve stability. Responsible AI design can protect users while still delivering value. Studies show that systems built on trust and cooperation often perform better over time than those based on only competition. This brings us back to the original idea. Game theory is about understanding decisions, but it also teaches us something deeper. Every choice affects others, and every system depends on interaction. As the world becomes more connected, the games we play are becoming more complex. Technology is faster, decisions are bigger, consequences are greater. We are all part of this system. Every action, every decision, every strategy shapes the future. So the final question is not just about winning, it is about responsibility. Are we building a world where everyone can succeed? Or are we creating a system where only a few win and many lose? The answer depends on how we choose to play the game. Because in the end, the most powerful strategy is not just intelligence, it is wisdom.